black cherry cider. This is a pretty simple recipe, okay? This is really more of a beginner's thing. If just a plain old cider is too simple for you, or you're graduating past that, or you just want to make black cherry cider. I mean, you know, it's all good. So we have here, this is specially selected 100% black cherry juice. I think this came from Aldi.
Aldi.
The ingredients are filtered water, black cherry juice, concentrate. Now, from concentrate is okay. What we don't have is ites and ates, also known as sulfites and sorbates. Those are preservatives. They can prevent it from fermenting or fermenting well, okay? I know you can get past them and all that kind of stuff, but it's best to avoid them if you can. So, I just shook that up because usually there's some goop on the bottom. And what is that?
That goop is good because that is all the sediment from the cherries themselves, and normally they're nitrogen rich, which will be helpful for the yeast. Now, we have not scientifically researched this to know exactly how much of that nitrogen is available for the yeast to munch on, so please don't...
We have plans for that anyway. But you know what I do need is a funnel.
Ah.
We have a funnel, and it was sanitized in...
The red bucket of sanitization!
Along with everything else that we're going to use. The only thing that wasn't sanitized was the inside of these jars.
But because they were hermetically sealed from the manufacturer, they should be fine.
They are sanitized inside. Okay, something about using juices to make cider. A couple of people have expressed concerns that it's not really a good quality cider if you're using juice. I would like to argue with them. However, it's difficult through a camera because it's very one-sided. So, I want to point out something. When you take whole apples and you chip them up and you squeeze them, you are producing juice. You take that juice and you ferment it. You're making cider. We are just skipping the middleman and going with juices. Why? Well, because we've tried to do whole fruit a couple of times to make cider and it's a pain in the butt. Also, this is a really good juice. This is a really good juice. This is a really simple recipe. There's no reason to make this complicated. If you want to do whole fruit, feel free. I have zero issue with doing that, but calling this a turbo cider and things like that just really irritates me.
That being said, if we had a full apple orchard in our backyard, you betcha we'd be using fresh apples.
You also betcha we'd probably have the right equipment to do it. We know at least one person in New Zealand that does that.
Oh yeah.
Cat. And I'm jealous because that's just awesome. We just don't have that kind of thing available to us. And even when we can get apples, it's very inconvenient. So, for simplicity's sake, we do it this way. Like I said, if you want to get whole fruit and do it that way, please, by all means, go for it. The apple juice. This is from Costco, Kirkland brand. And the ingredients are, you ready for this? It's a long one, apple juice. Seriously, that's all that's in this. Good stuff. We have found somewhat of a correlation between citric acid and ascorbic acid in apple juices, with them needing much more time to taste good. This particular juice tastes amazing right away, so we started using this one exclusively. Like, we have to go get more.
Yeah, this one actually is not from concentrate.
Yeah,
so
it's actually
cool
just pure juice. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill this about halfway. Actually, why am I filling this halfway? I don't need to fill this halfway. I'm gonna fill this all the way up. There's no extra stuff getting mixed in. See now, a lot of times, like you'll see, we did it once, and it really should have been called an apple wine. We added sugar to this to raise the ABV, and it was like a 10 or 11%. Well, to me, cider is really something between like a 3 and 8%-ish range. I'm betting you these juices will make it fall somewhere in that range. It's all good. That's the way we want it. That's where it's going to be. And I'm just gonna fill this to right there is good.
All right, Mr. Volumizer.
But that's roughly a gallon.
Can you guess how much of this gallon of apple juice you used? Was it a half or more?
I'll tell you right now, but not enough.
It should be more like
Yeah, it should be a little higher. Right
there. Yeah.
Right about there. Okay, so how much did I use? 3/4 of it. How did I know that? Because we used a quart for the black cherry, and then this is a gallon. So if we made a gallon, 3/4, yeah, see? Yeah.
All right, can you write that on our notes?
I'm gonna write that in my notes.
That apple juice smells so good.
It's really good apple juice. As we mentioned earlier, there is some amount of nitrogen in the juices and whatnots and stuff. But you know what? Yeast like to have a little bit more. Is this 100% necessary in a cider like this? No, not really. We've done it plenty of times without it. But I am using 2 grams of fermented dough and just a little touch of water. And you let that sit for like 5 minutes. Mix it with the whisk of an usually small size. That's optional. Pour that in, and that usually will help a lot with preventing stalls, making sure the yeast get everything that they need, that sort of thing.
Now, if you were super critical and didn't want to add that little bit of water, of course you can take some of your solution, your juice solution, and put that in there and mix that into there. But it's such a
Doesn't really
insignificant amount of water that you're not worried about that.
But now that I've added that water, let's take a reading on this so that we know what our original gravity is.
All right. Even though we didn't put additional sugars, we did put 2 types of juices in here, and we don't know if they have the same amount of sugars.
I'm gonna stir them up.
So
I was gonna stir it. That's why she stopped me.
you were just gonna stir it with that? You're
Yeah.
not gonna shake it?
I'll do this.
Okay.
You wanna mix it up so it's homogeneous. The swirl works really well. It also adds a little bit of oxygen. Get some oxygen in it. That way the colony has the right footing to start off with. Basically, you want to get extra oxygen in the beginning of a fermentation, but once alcohol is present, you don't want any more oxygen being introduced. Okay, reading. Getting a lot of questions lately about, do I really need a hydrometer? Yeah, you kind of do. It's a really good idea to know if your brew is safe, if it's in the right range. There's so much that you learn from it. It's not just about calculating ABV. Really, the calculating ABV is like the least part of it for me. I'm expecting this to be somewhere in the 1.050 to 1.060 range. And what do you know? Get rid of those bubbles. Go away, bubbles. Wow, that's pretty strong stuff. 1.062. The expectation is that this will go dry, just so you're aware. I could throw some dry stuff in.
And then the water.
Yeah, and then the liquid at the end. Yeah. See, logistics plays a part. I have some dry ingredients to put in here. I might be able to get that in there, but the yeast, there's like no way. Now, this dry ingredient is called pectic enzyme. And apple juice has a lot of pectin in it, and that can cause a haze. Is this an optional step? Absolutely. You don't have to add this at all. I am using the recommended amount, which is a ½ teaspoon per gallon of juice. What this does is it helps to extract a little bit more of the sugars, but it also breaks down any haze that could happen. Totally optional. You can leave this out. I won't be offended at all. Slightly hazy cider is totally okay. Doesn't really change the flavor. I am going to add this to my list. 1/2 teaspoon PE. And then yeast. This is a cider, which to me, cider is kind of like beer. So I'm going to use an ale yeast. This is US04. It's by Safe Ale, and I like this one. It's like a 10 to 11%, but you know, we all know yeast can't read, and they tend to go higher. But this brew should only really be something like a 9 to 9.5% max. I'll figure that out in a second for you. And yeah, I know that was really awkward, but that's just the way I did it. I am going to use half a packet because, well, you know, we're going to make another cider after this, and I want to use the other half. So I'm just going to eyeball roughly half. That's how specific you need to get. Eyeball roughly half. It's not critical. The amount of yeast that you add, as long as you add enough to start a colony, is fine. You can add a little bit more, but it's not necessary. Like, realistically, this should do 5 gallons. I'm doing 1 gallon. So I just put in enough for 2.5 gallons. It's not gonna hurt anything. I didn't do my patented fold.
That's right, because we're going to be using it in just a second, so we don't need to get carried away.
Okay, so now there's some stuff stuck in there, so I'm just going to pour this guy in. Okay, so now everything that we need for fermentation is in here except for one last thing.
That's an airlock.
So I just have a solid bung that we put in there, and I'm just going to shake the bejesus out. So I guess all the things were in here that we needed, and there was one thing that we didn't need that's still in here that I'm going to shake out. But really it doesn't leave because the stopper's on there.
Well, he's not really shaking anything out. He's actually shaking something in. So it's a misnomer.
Yeah. Not mixing it so much as really just getting oxygen into it. And it's going to hiss. Watch. Oh, it didn't do it.
Like,
when you don't think it's gonna, it totally spits at you. And every time you think, oh, I'm ready, nothing.
So.
Okay, so now let's put an airlock on this.
Okay.
Now, this is an airlock and a stopper. This is an important piece of equipment. We've been getting a lot of people lately saying, do I really need an airlock? Can't I just leave the lid loose? Can and should are two different questions. While you can do that, you shouldn't do that. You should always use an airlock. It is the safest way to make sure nothing gets in or out that you do not want getting in or out of said brew.
Now we have ours filled with properly diluted sanitization liquid. You can also use an inexpensive neutral spirit or a neutral spirit you found distasteful.
Like Scoresby Scotch. A word about the airlock fluid, okay? We did a video where we told people what Star San actually said about the usefulness of their product, and a lot of people have asked, and I always question this too. We've never had a problem using Star San in our airlocks, so I'm gonna continue doing it, okay? Just because the manufacturer says this is how we recommend it, doesn't mean that's the absolute must-do, or like the Star San police are gonna come to your house and arrest you after an hour.
Another thing about that is that we don't need this to be a sanitized zone. We need this to be a bug unfriendly zone. So we're not overly concerned.
Yeah,
that
I think it still kills the bugs.
Right, right.
So
that's the
now I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, she's saying as a sanitizer it may lose effectiveness, but as a bug killer in your airlock it still works.
There you go.
I like that. So what are we gonna do with this now?
We're gonna let it sit.
It's gonna go for probably a week, maybe 2. Who knows? If it doesn't start up in 3 days, I'm gonna add more yeast.
But we'll show you that. Now, you may notice that we have some bottles out. You may be thinking, Derek or Brian, what the heck are you doing? Are you jumping the gun? Maybe, but we'll find out.
We do want to take a reading. It's been like a week, and it really wasn't showing much airlock activity anymore. It was only a 1.062 to start, so not a lot of sugars in here to go with. Let's find out. Interesting color. It's kind of like orangey. It's supposed to be black cherry, but I guess that
like
sort of looks like black cherry.
Peachy or peachy.
Black cherry soda looks like that.
Yeah.
See, this is exactly the point that I didn't want it to get to. It's at 1.006, which makes me say, if I carbonate this as it is, I could be putting too much sugar into something that it could over-carbonate. That's bad. If it was below 1.00 or 1.00 or below, I should say, I was ready to carbonate this today and bottle it and make it do its thing. I'm not ready right now. I think this needs to sit for another week, at least several more days, and see if that number changes. But let me verify that. Yeah, it's 1.006. Let me take a note. Okay, so Derek washed all those bottles for nothing. It's just the way it goes sometimes. This was all sanitized though, so that's why I'm pouring this back in. I normally wouldn't just pour it back into a fermenter because of the lees and stuff, but it's gonna sit for another week anyway.
But I watched as he poured that back in there, and that lees cake actually compacted quite nicely.
Yeah.
So
there are little bubbles coming up the side though, making me wonder if maybe this wasn't sealed perfectly or something, making us think it was totally done. Because we started another cider the same day as this that's actually still bubbling. And I think they were about the same starting gravity. So we'll just give it another week. No big deal. See you then. Okay, so it's been another week. Time to give this another check. Make sure it's really, really definitively done. And then we move on to the next step. It's got a nice color. Probably say that every single time. Do we ever say, ooh, that's a horrible color?
I believe swamp water was used in describing the initial hue of the Irish mead.
Yes, you are right. Well, it was swamp water. It did drop a little bit, 1.004. But you know what? Here's the thing. There is a concern when you're carbonating of overcarbonation, okay? It does require quite a bit, and I know in other videos we have said, oh, well, 2 points can make a difference. It can. However, when we use our traditional standard 1 ounce of sugar per gallon to carbonate, there's a lot of leeway there. You can go a lot up, like almost double that much, to like half that much and still get carbonation. We use that because it's a nice round number, it's very easy to remember, and it's really just very simple to keep track of. So I'm not overly concerned. I don't see this going more than 2 or 3 more points if it does go at all. So we're probably gonna move on. But can you put that on there?
I can.
Just so that we got it.
If you are a more advanced brewer, particularly if you have a wide range of experience with beers, then you'd be more familiar, perhaps, with the different carbonation levels.
Yeah, I mean,
more
when you
carbonated
start-
brewing, less carbonated.
Right,
And so
different
you-
styles have different amounts of carbonation.
Right. So you could use a calculator if you knew specifically what carbonation style you preferred, and you can change the amount of sugars you put in it based on that calculator to get that carbonation level. This is just a middle of the road carbonation level, which we found to be perfectly suitable for our needs in hydromels and ciders.
All right. This is like our preliminary taste to see, once this is carbonated and whatever, will we want it sweeter, all right? First off, that color is absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. On the smell, it smells young, but not super, super young.
Yeah.
I get a little bit of the black cherry, definitely get some apple.
Yeah,
It's not bad.
I'm going for it.
Go for it.
So I've had this issue where I don't allow my face to express what I am sensing.
Ooh.
Because I'm thinking so hard on trying to come up with the right words to verbalize to you what it is I'm sensing. So I don't allow my face to go, oh, well, that was an oh.
This does not need sweetening.
It has an upfront sweetness that is really nice, and because it's the cherry and the apple combo, and you are reading both the cherry and apple notes, it has that sweet tart thing that reads appropriate for those two types of fruit.
I agree.
So I'm with Brian. I don't think this needs additional sweetness, and I also know, because we do intend on carbonating this, lots of times the brain, when it drinks a carbonated beverage, it automatically says, oh, this is sweet.
Which is weird because CO2 is bitter.
Yes. So I don't know why it does that. I don't
But
know if
it
it's
does.
because we've been so bombarded with
Bubbly, fizzy, sugary
colas
sodas. Yeah.
that we're like, carbonation equals sweet. I don't know. But that's what happens, and I think this is going to be lovely carbonated.
So the next step is we're gonna rack and bottle and carbonate. Not necessarily in that order. First, what I want to do is set up our sugar solution. Now, let me explain what I mean by sugar solution. That's probably not enough liquid. Here you go. When I say sugar solution, what I mean is this brew has gone dry, or essentially dry. There's nothing in it that's going to ferment anymore. First, what I want to do is I'm mixing 1 ounce, that is 28 grams of just plain old white sugar. I use that for 1 gallon with a little bit of the brew itself. And now, of course, I need something to mix it with. I'll just mix it with.
You didn't get your whisk.
I didn't get my whisk. The master baster is just gonna have to do. Now, before anybody worries about oxidization, this tiny amount, it's not gonna be a problem, okay? There's a little bit of gas in here anyway, you can see it coming out, so it's probably not oxidizing. But this is a way to make sure that you get the same amount of sugars into solution throughout the whole brew without diluting it and without having to overmix the entire batch. So I'm mixing the heck out of just this little bit so that I don't have to mix up the whole batch. Now, I know a lot of people like to just take like a teaspoon or whatever amount that they use and put it into each bottle when they're carbonating. I think that's not the best way to go, because have you ever actually measured teaspoons and tried to get exactly the same amount? Even a gram or 2 difference could make a huge difference in the amount of carbonation you get. So, we talk about the tables and the calculators online, but honestly, the 28 grams per gallon is pretty much in the middle. It's a pretty safe number all around. So use that, because that way it's divided between the whole gallon. If you added up a teaspoon or a half teaspoon or whatever you're doing per bottle and multiply that out by the whole thing, you'd probably find that you're using a lot more sugar, and it's going to vary from bottle to bottle, which means some might not have enough, some might have too much. And what happens when you have too much carbonation?
Kablooey!
Something like that. Another method that people use for doing this is they'll do it with hot water. And I'm seeing why they do that, because I can hear the grains of the sugar still. I've been mixing this for a good minute or two already. It'll get there, it just takes a little longer. Now that that's mixed up, I'm just gonna put it right into the pitcher, and we're going to rack the rest right into that pitcher. I am going to leave the cap on the auto siphon because there's some lees in the bottom here. We don't want that getting into our brew. But we do want to be as careful as we can. Just go halfway in. A few pumps to get it started, and we'll see you once it's racked. The next step is bottling. Now, to do that, we're using 16-ounce bottles, and I know that because of using our handy dandy pitcher with the raised letters, we have 116 ounces of cider, which comes out to 7.25 bottles. So I'm thinking there's going to be 7 bottles and maybe a little tiny bit left over that I know somebody that might want to just finish that. Or I tend to fill the bottles just a little bit more than normal, so I can probably use up that extra quarter. Either way, we're covered. You don't want to have this much in the bottom of a bottle is kind of the point. So all these bottles have been sanitized. Everything is good to go. We do use the auto siphon with the cap removed, and I just put it all the way in and all the way to the bottom. On the end, though, we're going to use a bottling wand, which is basically just a piece of tube with a springy thingy on the end, also known as a
Stem valve.
Stem valve, yeah, that. And what it does is when you push it all the way to the bottom of the bottle, it lets the liquid flow, and then when you lift it up, it stops, making for a lot neater process, because otherwise you have to crimp the tubing and all that kind of stuff, and it just gets kind of messy, not really a lot of fun. I'm gonna stick that in there. I'm gonna hand this off to Derica, who's going to hold it lower than the pitcher, and I'm going to start the siphon.
We do have detailed videos on how to bottle, how to rack, and all that good stuff, and I'll make sure to link those in the description below.
Today I'm using the crotchular method, which basically means I'm holding them between my legs so that I have 2 bottles here. I always like to have 2 bottles ready, and I go until it's coming all the way up to the top where it's just about going to overflow, and then I whip it out, and then we can put the cap on. What? It's a movie reference. Somebody's gonna get it. Brown bottles are always a little bit tricky. We're just gonna finish bottling. See you in a couple minutes. And now we have 7 perfectly filled bottles. They're all like the same, and there was nothing left over. Sorry, babe. Maybe next time. And what we're going to do with these is they're going to go into what we call the bomb shelter. It's really just a big plastic tote that's nice and thick walled. We got it from Lowe's, or you can get it from Home Depot or your big box home improvement store. I don't know, whatever they're called. And what that does is, in case any of these bottles decided to break and explode, it contains the flying glass shards as well as the liquid, but mostly the flying glass shards from, sticking into you, your friends, family, the walls, your pets, things like that.
Also, we're going to label these before we put them in there, so that way we know what the heck we bottled.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's important too, I guess. But it takes about a week to 10 days, so we'll be back to share with you our final tasting notes once it's been carbonated. And yeah.
That's it.
That's it. See you then. So it's been 11 days. Why has it been 11 days?
Because life.
We've both been sick, so yeah.
We did put this in the refrigerator because when you have a carbonated beverage, refrigeration is your friend. Otherwise, it could explode over the place in pouring. Not a bottle pressure issue, but just a mess issue.
A gusher, yes. Yeah, it does help to keep it down because it keeps the CO2 smaller. I think that's what it is.
There's some sciencey
Yeah,
thing.
it contracts the liquid.
Sounds right.
But anyway, this was left in the bomb shelter for 11 days to carbonate. Let's see if it did. Oh yeah.
Got me.
Totally carbonated. It's got a beautiful color.
It does. Now Brian is doing a careful pour, but I think you can see, yep, from your angle, you can see that there is a nice bit of carbonation.
I can make some head if you want.
It's not going to have head retention like a beer, because it's not a beer, but it's still nicely carbonated.
Yeah, it's got some carbonation to it.
So again, to that color, it is a beautiful color. It's crystal clear.
Yeah, it's much more red than you think.
It's kind of like cough syrup red.
Yeah.
It almost
really
looks
is.
artificial. It's so vibrant, but it has a depth to the color that makes it not look like that weird orangey color. So yeah, good.
It's hard to get a lot on the smell in a glass like this.
And I've noticed that with ciders in general, their aroma,
When they're cold too.
when they're cold, yeah, I'm getting more of the apple notes on the aroma.
See, I'm actually getting the fruity dark cherry. I'm getting dark fruit.
Okay, that time I
A little bit of apple.
did more mouth open breathing, and I was getting some cherry.
I'm just gonna taste it. Oh wow.
I like it.
It's dry, which we knew.
Yep.
It's tangy. It's got a little bit of fruit sweetness there though. Mm-hmm. Definitely not an apple cider. Like you can tell this is a mix.
Yes.
There's some apple, there's a little bit of the malic acid coming through.
Yep.
That's giving that tanginess.
Yep.
But the black cherry adds a really nice, oh, sorry, microphone shifted. Gives a really nice, deep complexity to it.
Yeah.
Much more than I ever thought it would. I really wasn't expecting this.
I also think the black cherry has aided, or something that we did, has aided with what we typically get from an apple fermentation where it's a little off.
Yep.
I'm not getting any off
Now,
notes from this.
this tastes very mature,
Yeah.
very finished, very full. A lot of times a young cider can taste kind of, well, young. It tastes like it's not finished yet, like something's missing
Right,
or,
right.
you know, that kind of thing. This does not have any of that. And it's a little shocking to me. I don't think we back sweetened this, did we?
I don't think so.
Or did we put erythritol in? No, this was 1.004.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nope, didn't do nothing to it.
It has a really clean finish, but it has a surprisingly complex depth to it in the mouth that I wasn't really anticipating.
There's an aftertaste though.
Yeah.
Like, well, okay. To me, like the finish includes that. So it does actually have a very long finish. It's very, it is clean though. I would give you that.
Okay. So it's not clean as in it finishes and then just evaporates.
It's a crisp
It's
thing.
a crisp cleansing sensation that does linger with you.
Well, let me just give you the journey. As it enters, it actually comes across more like a liqueur. I get instantly like this viscous feel and a heady liqueur black cherry thing going on. Then as it enters the mouth more, the sweetness goes away a little bit, and that's when the tanginess comes in. And that kind of makes your mouth water a little bit, makes you want the fruitiness again. And then as you swallow, that fruitiness tends to come back. It's a really, for what this is, okay, for what this is incredibly complex. I did not expect this at all. This is also 7.9%, so it's not exactly a lightweight either. It's got a little bit of alcohol to it.
This reminds me a lot of some of the nicer commercial ciders that we've tried.
Yes. Yeah, there's been like one or two that you've had.
We didn't sweeten it. I'm trying to recall what ciders it's bringing to mind, and probably woodchuck or something like that.
Yeah, it's better than woodchuck.
Well, the one that was fruit had fruit in it. I think
there was one, and I don't remember who made it.
That was woodchuck.
You had it at the burger place. I don't remember who makes it.
The burger place is Engine 9.
Engine number 9.
If you ever happen to come to St. Petersburg, Florida, and you want a really good burger and pair it with some craft brews.
They literally have large screen TVs with the list, and it rotates because they have about 60 kinds at any given time.
It's definitely worth a visit.
Yeah. Yeah, this is much, much better than I thought it was ever going to be. I thought, oh yeah, we'll make a black cherry cider, and it's nice and simple and easy. Wow. This is surprisingly good.
Yeah, and considering it was such a simplistic process, and to come out with something...
Yeah, to make an all-juice cider that has this much flavor is really impressive.
I want to go down this road more. I want to try different things.
Well, thankfully, we bought a bunch of apple juice, so...
We did. So there's going to be more ciders. So
see, look at that head.
See?
Got head.
Yeah.
So, something that's interesting about cider to me, a lot of people see I can't drink the last bit of that. That's just going to bother me. Natural fermentation, you get a little bit in the bottom. Sorry, folks, just the way it is.
It is.
Something that's interesting with ciders, a lot of people see it as a beer replacement, okay? Meaning like it's that crisp, refreshing, almost a light kind of thing that you have like after you cut the grass or something. Normally, I feel the same way with ciders. They're a nice, relaxing drink. This is a little more of an exploration though.
Yeah, this one is like, sure, I can see being really happy drinking this after cutting the grass, but I can also see this really being something to sip and savor just on its own.
Not that this tastes anything like it at all, but I put this in the same category as I would put like some of the stout beers that I have, the bigger dark beers.
Right, because it has that hidden complexity.
Yeah, there's more to this than just, oh, it's just a black cherry cider. No, this is nice.
This is really nice.
It's got a great acidity level. The sweetness level is just perfect. I mean, could we take it sweeter? Of course. But the sweetness level at this is just right. It balances everything out. There's a rich, thick, viscous mouthfeel, more so than it really ever should have. Like, it really, I don't know where that came from completely.
The only thing I can imagine is that in the fruit, like the juice making process, they extracted enough of the tannins that's inherent in the fruit and it carried through, because it feels like something that it has a mouthfeel that you would have added tannins to.
Yeah, this has a mouthfeel of like a Cabernet almost.
Yeah,
like it really does have that kind of mouthfeel.
It's lovely.
Really, really awesome.
We can sit here and talk about how lovely this is, but it's just lovely. We don't need to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, so make this one, but we got to put numbers
We got to put numbers on it.
See now, our scoring system goes 1 through 10. 1 means it's total crap and you're probably going to dump it out. 10 means it's amazing and probably one of the best things you have. And if it happens to be an 11, that means it's probably the best thing you have, okay? Like maybe you have 1 or 2 things that are just like super top shelf. The whole 5 is where is my cutoff. I don't really go for that anymore. More just scale of 1 through 10, from ick to awe. Let's go with that. From ick to awe, there's a t-shirt. Now, we don't do a lot of ciders, like to rate this. We don't really rate it the same as you would a wine or a mead. Like you can't put this next to the Metheglen and say, oh, well, you know, because then it comes personal preference.
Sure. I think regardless of what we do, there's also always going to be personal preference because we're human.
Right.
And we can't help ourselves. But we still need to keep in mind that this is a cider, and so we should rate them as a preconceived cider.
Yeah, if someone was to hand this to me, not knowing anything about it, what is my enjoyment level of this? Is it a 1 through 10 or 11?
Right, I'm ready.
I'm almost ready. All right. 1, 2, 3, 9.
9.5.
I was lower that time. I was debating on 9.5. I was even debating on 10.
Yeah, I was bouncing between 9 and 10, and I was just like...
I went 9 simply because there is a very slight, the more I've been drinking of it, the more exploratory you get to be, very slight bitter note in there that I think had it been a touch sweeter. Now after really going through this, a touch sweeter, a couple more points, would have brought this to a 10. That's how nitpicky I get when I get to the 8s and 9s. Like, it's got to be that kind of good. So a couple more points of sweetness might have bumped it up to 9.5 or 10.
Now, I noticed that bitter note as well, but to me, it seems appropriate because we're fermenting cherries and apples, which both have the sweet-bitter combo thing.
Tart, not bitter.
Okay.
There's a difference.
Fine.
I'm just saying that you have your own perception of it. You did give it a 9.5. But that bitter note, there's a tanginess and a tartness that I really love. I think that's fantastic. But at the end of that, there's almost like like orange pithy kind of thing. Just a touch of a bitter note.
I looked for it that time and separated the tart from the bitter.
It's so minute, but it's enough to keep it from being a 10.
Yeah, well, that's why I gave it a 9.5.
That's really, yeah. To me, that's why I didn't give it a 9.5 or a 10. So I think just a touch of sweetness could overcome that.
Sure.
And it would be great because there's nothing we added that would add that note. So we'd have to overcome that note.
Fair enough.
And that's part of homebrewing too, is sometimes you add something and you go, yep, that's where I done screwed up. That thing that I added was the wrong thing to do.
So if you're still watching, I want to tell you something that we've got asked this a lot of times in the comments, and I want to share this information with you right now, and that's back sweetening after carbonation.
You can't.
You can't. And there's many reasons for that, mostly because the most neutral back sweetener is sugar, and sugar is a granular substance, and it goes into the beverage and it creates nucleation sites, which are these little pockets that allows the gas to rapidly escape.
Yeah.
So you
Not just that, when you open a bottle that's carbonated, the carbonation escapes.
Yeah,
You really can't mix that in any meaningful way without losing all your carbonation.
So ideally, if you are going to make a carbonated beverage, you want to taste it before you carbonate it and determine at that point if you want to back sweeten it or not. And then you have to do some math. I'm sorry, it's the way it goes. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have to sweeten it to taste, so you have it at the sweetness level. And then on top of that, you have to add the correct amount of fermentable sugar to carbonate it.
That's where it gets tricky.
And then you have to carbonate it, and when it's done with that carbonation time, because if you let it continue, it's going to continue creating pressure.
And you lose up your sweetness.
But when it's finally carbonated, but hasn't continued, then you want to stop that fermentation, and so you need to pasteurize. Something
of note, that is the way we've done it several times. It's a little risky, and we've talked about this. Mm-hmm. It's a little risky, it's chancy. The way to make that very simple is use allulose or erythritol as your sweetener to back sweeten, and then add your sugar, and then you don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Because the way she's describing and what we've done a couple times in the past, you have to pasteurize it in the middle of all this, hoping it carbonated enough, but left the sweetness. So it's still a kind of a poke and hope situation. It's kind of risky because you never know exactly what it's going to do.
Right.
We've been lucky. We've not had anything over carbonate or make bottle bombs. We tend to err on the side of lesser than more. So that's helpful. But if you're worried about that, easy. Just use a non-fermentable sugar like allulose or erythritol. Works beautifully well and solves that problem.
We have plenty of videos on the different ways you can have a sweet carbonated beverage. I will link those, future Jerica, in the description below, so that way you'll have access to them and you can make your own educated decision on what you want to do for your particular brew.
In the meantime, make black cherry cider. So good. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.